Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the INFOWARS Nightly News. Today is Monday, August 27, 2012, and I'm your host, Aaron Dykes.
Tonight on the INFOWARS Nightly News, Aaron Dykes speaks with the American Small Business League President Lloyd Chapman about breaking evidence involving government fraud. Then, U.S. veterans are being forcibly committed to mental facilities as indefinite detentions increase across America. Plus, the unyielding conditioning of the public as eye scanning and GPS technology are rolled out into our airports and schools. All that and more on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
Well, the RNC convention is kicking off today in Tampa, and instead of focusing on the phony elections, the phony circus, the phony dog and pony show between supposed rivals Mitt Romney and Obama, instead focus is turned to the protesters, who as usual have been labeled anarchists and lawbreakers. Don't focus on the illegitimate political parties who have usurped our political processes and got in bed with the corporate interest and taken over everything we have, undermined the Constitution, and are now ruining our way of life and economy. No, let's blame a few provocateurs who are repeatedly found at all these events to be paid, usually police or military provocateurs, starting stuff up, wearing masks, just breaking a little glass, so that all protesters can be demonized, and then police can do things like harass people holding up signs with sticks they say aren't allowed. Let's just roll some of that video that includes the propaganda rollout leading into this RNC convention, getting ready to insulate the Republican Party, never thinking it could be what's illegitimate, but instead focusing on those outside the convention, raising questions.
The Republican National Convention in Florida just days away now. The city of Tampa is bracing itself for a possible hurricane.
Isaac certainly isn't the only potential threat authorities are watching in Tampa. The other serious concern, anarchists.
The Department of Homeland Security and the FBI announced on Wednesday there's the potential for attacks by anarchist extremists at the convention in Tampa.
They are called the Black Bloc. They are anarchists bent on causing trouble and disruption with fights, vandalism, and rioting.
There's no doubt that there's a small percentage that will come here bent on destruction and disruption.
We have to deal with lawbreakers, with anarchists who have nothing to do with voicing an opinion. They're just going out and destroying property and breaking the law and battering officers.
What is the latest on the potential for anarchists to show up in Tampa?
Intelligence bulletin obtained by CNN warns of violence by anarchists.
And so you get the idea. Once again, it's about branding the protesters as violent, anarchist, outside of law, when most have nothing to do with that. Of course, you do get a few bad apples, but here the convention has dodged the natural disaster of Hurricane Isaac and instead created this manufactured disaster of against the protesters, never questioning the RNC. And this police state is now totally typical of all these political party conventions. You're going to see a similar police state presence at Charlotte because they know there's a lot of people dissatisfied with Obama, dissatisfied with Romney, and the entire political spectrum, the entire direction the country is headed. Everybody knows what a farce this is, so they've got to corral those who are raising questions, raising signs, keep them out of the media eye, and make sure they're branded as bad people. This has been going on since at least 1968 outside the Democratic Convention in Chicago, where police ended up beating a number of the demonstrators because they supposedly got out of hand. But this is exactly like the G20 meetings. No one could question the illegitimacy of what's going on inside and all the bad deals happening. It's just about the people outside. And this ties in once again with the ongoing agenda that Homeland Security has been rolling out at least since 2009, really dates back more than a decade, to labeling all types of Americans as potential domestic extremists. And at the top of that list is absolutely the returning veterans. There's a new plot that's been busted up. They're now being prosecuted in court. It's the anarchist militia, which has entirely military recruits, and supposedly among their other plans were plans to assassinate Obama and overthrow the government and other made-up fantasies, just like you see from all the Muslim terrorists who've been accused of doing things including poisoning the state's apple crop, plotting to bomb a dam, bombing a Forsyth Park fountain, and taking over Fort Stewart. Yeah, these are things that could really be done by a couple of knuckleheads with guns. Now, that being said, they are accused of murdering some of their own militia members to keep them quiet on this supposed plot. This whole thing already stinks of a manufactured patsy modus operandi that fits everything we know. That's because they've been completely demonizing the returning veterans. On the one hand, putting them into that PTSD corral where they lose their rights to own guns and to speak out against the government, and they're going to be thrown in the loony bin. We'll get to that story, but you've heard some of those reports from last week. But, gee, do you think this group could be part of a PSYOP? Well, their name is FEAR, F-E-A-R, short for Forever Enduring, Always Ready. And apparently they were going to overthrow the entire government and take out Obama. Well, that's what they want you to believe. We'll see how the facts pour in, but it absolutely fits into their propaganda meme. There was that 2009 key Homeland Security report where they said returning veterans were going to be the threat. Lone wolves were going to be the threat. It's white al-Qaeda. It's no longer Muslim extremists and jihadists trying to get inside our country. No, now suspicion has to be turned on all Americans. And, of course, they're warning veterans and active duty military to look out for other suspicious people in their units, to break up that unit integrity, to further divide the troops amongst themselves, because they know that those are otherwise some of the strongest voices left in our country, some of the most patriotic people, and many of them well aware of what's going on in this country. This ties in, of course, to the Sikh shooter, who's also been accused of being basically a neo-Nazi type. He was tied to all these PSYOP operations and also came out of the military. Suzanne Posel, only a few days ago, had the key article, The Manufactured U.S. Veteran Threat Against Obama That Will Justify Martial Law, and cites how all of these supposed threats to assassinate the president all come from former veterans and also all come from at least alleged white supremacy groups and the supposed nexus points therein. And you better believe that the Southern Poverty Law Center and other usual suspects are there to talk this whole point up, but it's all part of a script. And that ties in, unfortunately, with the increasing trend we're seeing of returning veterans being targeted for their PST conditions, their other traumatic conditions, and they're using that as a pretext to take away their rights. You heard about the case of U.S. Marine Brandon Robb, who spoke out, said 9/11 was an inside job, made other comments about the Federal Reserve and the monetary system, and basically the direction our country's headed in that so many people are waking up to, but instead it was used as a pretext to persecute him. Now, the judge has so far overruled that, saying there really was no factual basis to detain him and confine him and otherwise take away his rights and label him as crazy. But there's been other cases. John Whitehead of the Rutherford Institute has received numerous reports from other veterans. They say they're being discriminated against, and at least one veteran in particular has lost his firearms. They were confiscated, and he was not charged with any criminal activity, any violent intention other than what they based off of his psychological profile. That's what you get out of these veteran hospitals and the way they treat our soldiers. So it's okay for them to carry weapons when they're being forced into 4th, 5th, 6th tours, put into that meat grinder where anybody would go crazy. And in particular, they're going crazy all the more because they know there's not a real mission going on. This happened during Vietnam as well. So many soldiers lost faith, lost their sense of duty and purpose because they knew all of this was bogus, based on lies, and basically our foreign policy has been hijacked, and a lot of these people don't want to serve these nefarious agendas, and we're seeing the unfortunate results roll out as the state wants itself to be the only power monopoly, wants to demonize legal firearm ownership, starting with the veterans, supposedly the heroes that we've all put yellow ribbons on our cars and heralded as great folks when they're serving overseas, but when they come home, different story. So, of course, we're seeing this script come to life where white al-Qaeda, where regular Americans, where Tea Party members, where returning veterans, they're all demonized at the exact point in time when the U.S. and its foreign policy allies are openly working with al-Qaeda, openly putting them in Syria, after they openly put them in Libya, and are openly backing them in part of this Arab Spring overthrowing regimes. Also, they can kick off a wider war with Iran and the major world powers. Pretty sick and disgusting. And of course, they're continuing with their other plan, no longer really looking for any real threats in airports, but just getting us acclimated to a total Big Brother state, total takeover of technology. And the plan they've had all along under Homeland Security since the very beginning, before 9/11, rolled out officially in the plans under the Patriot Acts 1 and 2 and all the other related legislation. And that is the Trusted Traveler Program, and part of it has always been iris scans, but we see fresh in the news today, as though it was just thought of last week randomly by a technology firm, is eye-scan technology the future of airport security? And they talk about A-Optics technology and their $42 million in research to try to identify passengers within seconds through an iris scan, supposedly scanning them through this database. Now, this doesn't protect anyone's safety, as I'm sure you can figure out. As I'm sure you realize, TSA is not there for safety. They're there for prisoner training, acclimation to this wider police state. If they wanted to profile people, they never would have let the suspected hijackers in on the visas during 9/11. They never would have let the underwear bomber on the plane, giving him State Department clearance to board without a passport. No, those facts don't matter. It's just about getting you to get into the system. And what's to keep someone with violent intentions from registering anyway under the Trusted Traveler Program? No, it's just about this new system. It's always been part of the plan, but now we're seeing it rolled out, being gradually accepted, and frankly, in a way, they like all the revolt against the pat-downs and the body scanners because it presents the false Hegelian option of this new Trusted Traveler Program's biometrics to be the only way you'll be allowed to travel in the future. All this was written about by the eugenicists and the other world domination schemers more than 100 years ago. But I'm sure no one's interested in all of that. Also in technology news, scientists have successfully hacked the brain to obtain private data. They say they've used off-the-shelf emotive brain technology, which costs a mere $300, and they're able to use it to basically elicit, at least in their practical principles, things like PIN numbers, memorize security numbers, passwords. It's all part of this familiar interface recognition inside the brain that they've learned to recognize. They call it the P300 signal, and they say that signal, the P300, is typically given off when a person recognizes something meaningful, such as someone or something they interact with on a regular basis. So you've got these researchers basically masterminding how to read your mind, and especially to gather some of the most sensitive data, the stuff we've all learned to memorize to access our various accounts online. Now that's all in danger with very cheap technology that obviously leaves it wide open to hackers and everyone else and governments who spy on us without warrants. Meanwhile, more prisoner training news. Austin kids, the latest to be tracked with GPS technology. They're doing rollouts in 9 schools here in Austin, Texas, where I live, as well as in San Antonio, Dallas, La Jolla. And this has already been done in places all across the country. They're going to carry a cell phone-like device that registers a GPS signal tracking each of the 1,700 students in this particular program at several intervals throughout the day. It registers them with a quote-unquote mentor who's going to check in with them and make sure they're doing what they're told. All of this erodes parental rights, not only to indoctrinate your kids with actual facts and knowledge from actual books instead of from government institutions with watered-down Big Brother rewritten history versions, but also to physically track you and treat you what public schools have long already felt like, well, a prison, where they also track prisoners. Of course, many of the prisoners out on parole and other release programs have already been forced to wear GPS bracelets, ankle bracelets, and